Zimbabwe's reserves supporting the gold-backed digital token have risen to $533 million following President Mnangagwa's directive mandating 50% of mineral royalties to be paid in kind. The reserves, including 2.67 tons of gold valued at $228 million held by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, are now over 3 times the amount of local currency in circulation. This growth is expected to reinforce currency and price stability. Since ZIG's launch in April 2024, gold holdings have nearly doubled from 1.5 tons, with the token circulation reaching 183 million ZIG, approximately 5% of a reserve money. So let's talk more about this as we engage Dr. Prosper Chitambara, a developmental economist who joins me from Harare, Zimbabwe. Thank you so much, Dr. Chitambara, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what are the key factors driving Zimbabwe's gold production increase from 2024 up till now, and how sustainable is that growth?
Well, I think it's fairly sustainable. Zimbabwe is one of the biggest producers of gold on the African continent. But this increase is on account of the incentives that the central bank has actually put in place to incentivize gold production, especially by the artisanal miners, the small-scale miners. In fact, I think the bulk of the gold production is actually being driven by the small-scale gold producers. So the central bank has been very strategic in terms of coming up with a number of incentives to try to incentivize gold production, being a very strategic mineral in Zimbabwe, as it's also anchoring our currency, the Zimbabwe gold, but also even the global trends in the pricing of gold. They have incentivized gold production in the country. So I would say it's a combination of both internal factors, but also external factors.
All right. I mean, we're talking about $533 million in reserves, and one would question how significant this is when we talk about, strengthening the Z currency and probably ensuring a stable economy for the country.
Well, it's obviously an improvement, but that's not the ideal situation. According to the SADC macroeconomic convergence criterion, SADC nations must aim for at least about 6 months import cover, which is about $6 billion US dollars, given that our average monthly import bill is around $1 billion. So I think we should be, at the minimum, we need at least 3 months import cover, but we should be aiming for at least 6 months import cover, which is about $6 billion United States dollars. And when you compare with countries in the region, Zambia, they're at about almost $4 billion. Botswana, almost about $4.5 billion. Then South Africa, close to about 60 billion US dollars. So Zimbabwe at 533 million. We are still on the low side when you compare with other countries in the region. So I think I'm hoping that this year, given the positive projections, economic projections, I think there's going to be a significant improvement in agricultural production, which will spur our agricultural exports, where I think that will also help in terms of bolstering our reserves, and also projecting that the trends in terms of gold pricing will remain favorable. So I think this year, I think there is scope for us to even do much better than we did last year.
All right, permit me to chip in this question. You made mention of artisanal miners contributing crucially to the growth that we've seen in this particular sector, and of course the fact that it has improved the value of the sector. But then we still see illegal miners crossing from Zimbabwe to South Africa to engage in illegal activities. Is there something that is missing in between the lucrativeness of the business in Zimbabwe as regards having to risk their lives in South Africa?
Well, I think that has been, I wouldn't say most of the people that are going to South Africa are going into the mining sector. Of course, they are targeting different sectors of the South African economy, yes, but we've heard of those incidences. But I would say on the average, we've seen a boom, even locally in Zimbabwe, in terms of artisanal mining, not just gold mining, but even different minerals, really. And given some of the challenges that we've been facing, especially on the labor market front, I foresee, I think, a growing trend in terms of small-scale mining in the economy. I think I would say for the foreseeable future.
Do you think that government regulation could help in that regards?
Yeah, definitely. Not just regulations, but also government support in terms of facilitating the formalization of these artisanal miners, because most of them are informal miners or producers. So I think there's a role for government to facilitate the formalization through coming up with the right kind of incentives to incentivize the voluntary registration and formalization of their mining activities.
Okay, so what impact has the 50% mineral royalties in kind policy had on Zimbabwe's reserve accumulation strategy?
Well, I think the impact, okay, let me start by the impact on we've been experiencing some relative stability on the exchange rate, I would say in the last quarter of last year, and of course that has also carried over into the early part of this year. There has been relative stability on the exchange rate front, but also even in terms of our overall pricing. But of course, going forward, obviously, the government and the central bank have indicated that they will continue, because now they require the miners to pay a part of their royalties in minerals. So I think that's going to, if there's a significant boom in production, in mining production, I think that's also going to significantly improve our reserve position. So I think the mining sector is poised to grow this year, and obviously that's going to positively impact on our reserve position.
Okay, so I recall that when the ZiG was newly introduced, it's actually, experienced a lot of challenges, and at some point the value, went up, and at some point it dropped to a very abysmal point. But now that we're seeing a bit of growth, can the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe sustain the reserve to currency ratio at more than 3 times local currency in circulation as we are seeing?
No, I think so. I think this year, with the positive outlook, I think it's actually possible, and I think it's possible even to sustain the exchange rate and the price stability that we have seen. But of course, we need to continue to sustain even other or complement with other supporting measures, especially on the liquidity front. We need to continue to sustain the very tight fiscal and monetary policy stances that both the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank have adopted. I think that will be crucial in terms of sustaining the current relative stability.
Well, but then what challenges could arise from the introduction of higher Z currency denominations?
I think obviously the issue of inflation, because inflation in Zimbabwe has largely been driven by liquidity, money supply growth. So I think that's the downside risk, obviously. But I think if the economy is growing faster and more sustainably, I think it will be easier to absorb that excess liquidity or that excess growth in aggregate demand, because that will be matched by a corresponding increase in aggregate supply or production.
Okay, so let's also understand what the RBZ is actually doing in maintaining confidence in the Z currency, because we know that there are external economic pressures not only affecting Zimbabwean currency but other African currencies. But in this case, for the Z to remain stable and continue to appreciate, is there anything that they're looking to do to improve on that?
I think for the central bank, they've just stated that they're going to try to maintain a tight monetary policy stance to tighten the money supply, reserve money supply in the economy. Of course, they don't have much control over broad money supply growth, but also hoping that the Ministry of Finance or the fiscal policy will play a supportive role to the monetary policy, because that's critical in terms of ensuring there's policy congruence and complementarity, which is critical for sustained stability in the macroeconomy.
Let's now look at the rates. How does the current exchange rate of, according to what we understand, 24 ZiG to about $1 compared to the parallel market where we saw ZiG between 35 and 38 ZiG, of course, resulting about $1. Looking at that disparity, what does this signify for the markets?
It's a challenge, but of course, like I said, in the last few months, we've seen a bit of relative stability, even in terms of the black market premium. So at the moment, the official exchange rate is around 27 ZiG to the USD, while the black market is averaging about 34, 35 ZiG per 1 USD. So I think we are okay at the moment, but we just need to sustain that momentum that we've built over the last 3 or so months by further tightening things up, especially on the fiscal side.
On fiscals. Okay, so what about the gold reserves? Do you think there is a significant role it is also playing in the discussions around Zimbabwe's broader de-dollarization strategy?
Yeah. It is actually. Of course, unfortunately, the authorities have not yet unveiled the roadmap, but we know that at some point in time, whether this year or probably next year. But I think what's important is to sustain that low and stable inflationary environment for at least a year. I think that will be critical in terms of restoration of confidence and trust in the local currency, the ZiG. Because ultimately, trust and confidence in any currency is a function of inflation. If inflation is low and stable, it means more and more economic agents would want to transact and to store their value in that local currency. So we need to sustain low and stable inflation for at least 12 months. I think that will provide a solid basis and framework for a sustainable de-dollarization program.
But there are also talks about probable risks in the over-reliance on gold production for economic stability. Do you think that is a concern? And how is the government hoping to address diversification if this crops up?
And the beauty with Zimbabwe is that we are a major producer of a number of minerals, not just gold, but also even lithium, diamonds. So I think that helps in terms of mitigating the risk that maybe there's a huge slump, maybe in the price of gold. But for what we've seen with the price of gold over time is that it has tended to increase. So I think we are fairly okay. But of course, we have other mineral commodities that we could actually count on because of the diversity of the mining sector. We've also recently discovered gas. So I think that's also going to help in terms of providing sustainability to the macroeconomy.
All right, even if we look at it from the global scale, just as you said, the difference could be, well, not too encouraging when you look at the quality of the gold reserve that Zimbabwe has compared to other countries. But one thing is actually important, and that is that government can build on this trajectory and see how the $533 million reserve can improve its value probably in the coming months or in the coming years. Maybe other African countries who actually apply the trade in this can equally learn from what the Zimbabwean government is doing. Dr. Prosper Chitambara, a developmental economist, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us on the show.
Thank you for having me.